Reddit. What are your college roommate horror stories? Story 1. My roommate and I hail from different nations, so I made an effort not to be too unsettled by her peculiar behavior. She practically lived in our cramped space, and anytime I glanced her way, she seemed to be staring at pictures of herself on her laptop. Her desk was adorned with multiple frame selfies. Not pictures with friends, just of herself. I wondered if this was part of her culture, but it was still strange. Story 2. On my first year of college, I shared a bunk bed with a drunken roommate who came home before me and slept on the top bunk. He had clearly drank too much, as he had wet the bed like an open fire hydrant. When I came home later and sat down, I was met with a sudden and shocking flash flood puddle. Needless to say, I threw the mattress in the shower and demanded he get me a new one. Story 3. In 2012 in Ontario, Canada, a shocking case of kidnapping and manslaughter occurred. My roommate, along with his associates, kidnapped 2 men and held them for ransom. One was released weeks later, but the other was not so lucky, as his body was eventually found cemented in the basement of the apartment I had been renting a room in. The police burst into the apartment while my roommate was asleep and arrested him. I immediately moved out and learned that they were all sentenced to jail. Story 4. My freshman year roommate had an unforgettable experience one night when she returned home drunk. She was so inebriated that she stumbled all the way to the basement and, amazingly, was able to find the clothes dryer instead of the washing machine to relieve herself in. The following day, she left her clothes in the washing machine and some kind person had put them in the dryer for her, not knowing that was the same one she had used the night before to answer the call of nature. I was both appalled and impressed at the same time. Story 5. My first roommate was something else. He was socially awkward, often mumbling to himself with shifty eyes. He would eat my food and tried to get me to join some Catholic sect. He'd lounge around in his tighty-whities, refusing to clothe himself. If I had guests or girls over, he'd just sit down and put a blanket over his lap. I even walked in on him jacking it or blaring porn on multiple occasions. He'd constantly have long phone arguments with his girlfriend, who looked like she had been greedily plucked from Captain Planet. The kicker for me was when he had a breakdown, calling the RA and a counselor. While I was writing a paper, he became highly agitated and said something about demon juice. I looked over at him asleep and thought to myself, I should take out a knife and kill him, then myself. No offense to demon juice. I quickly replied, none taken. Then did a double take as the horror of the situation dawned on me. I got out of there and moved to a different floor. Hopefully someone can benefit from my past misery. Story 6. One of my biggest regrets from college was drinking to excess, and I'd often get so drunk that I couldn't remember anything about the night before. One night, I was particularly wasted and I don't remember how I got back to my room. But I do remember waking up around 4 a.m. to the strangest dream. I was passed out in bed when my roommate came over and started taking off his pants. In the dream, I woke up while he was pulling them down and I rolled over, and with one big shove, sent him flying across the room and into his bed in his tighty-whities. I was a lot bigger and stronger than him, and I can still see the image of him slamming into his bed like it was yesterday. Story 7. My roommate and I had a very awkward situation that would repeat itself time and time again. Every time I'd come home and unlock the door, it took an eternity to open the old-school push combination lock. I'd find him hastily shutting off his monitor with one hand over his trousers. It happened so often that I eventually had to have a stern conversation with him about it because it started affecting my own love life. I'd bring girls home and they'd catch him in the act, which almost always put a damper on the evening. Story 8. I had a university roommate who was a bit off the rails. At first, she would just steal my food. I couldn't leave anything in the kitchen for more than 12 hours before it would disappear. She also left passive-aggressive notes in the kitchen accusing me of lying about my food allergies. To top it off, she convinced my flatmates to pile up furniture outside my door so I couldn't get out. I was often in tears and unable to sleep because of her screaming through the wall. Eventually, my parents had to come down and take me home. I had to drop out of university, but as a last resort, I was placed in a new flat with 5 guys. It was a much messier environment, but it was also so much nicer. Story 9. My roommate, a real nerd who weighs 400 pounds, was a fan of the original Japanese Sailor Moon series. He had a petite red-headed girlfriend whom he'd allowed to regularly abuse him in everyday life. One Tuesday at 6 p.m., he suddenly asked me to vacate the dorm until 11 p.m., as they were planning to have some romantic time. I was a bit annoyed that he gave me no warning, but I obliged and left. When I returned at midnight, I was met with a shocking sight. His girlfriend was in black vinyl bondage gear, a taxi driver's hat, and armed with a riding crop, as she whipped him all over, leaving welts from head to toe. I quickly made my escape from that scene. Story 10. My girlfriend and her roommate were fighting, but then we all decided to watch an episode of The Walking Dead. We started to discuss our problems when suddenly her roommate's boyfriend pulled a gun on me. I asked why he would do that and if I had been threatening him, but he hadn't pointed it at me. My girlfriend and I ran into the bedroom and I called the police. Before they arrived, he had gone into the other bedroom and there was a single gunshot. He had ended his life. We never went back to that apartment except to move out. After the incident, I vowed never to watch The Walking Dead again. I later found out that his girlfriend had mentioned that he had been feeling suicidal for months. It made me realize how important it is to get help and talk about your problems, even if you think you're just seeking attention. I still wish he had mentioned it, even as a joke, so I would have known it was serious and gotten him help. Even though it wasn't my fault, it's been difficult to accept that I couldn't have done anything differently. But I have grown from it and will never forget the lesson it taught me. Story 11. My friend had the best possible roommate her freshman year of college. They got along well and she was quite clean and rarely around. Every once in a while she even baked. Everything had been going great until my friend noticed that her birth control pills were going missing. She chalked it up to absent-mindedness at first, but soon became sure that she wasn't being forgetful. The only logical explanation was that her roommate was taking them. When my friend confronted her, she broke down in tears, confessing that she had gotten pregnant over spring break and was trying to abort the baby with the pills. My friend was horrified and contacted the RA, who got in touch with her roommate's parents and had them remove her from the school. It's unknown what happened after that, but it goes to show that people can be unpredictable. Story 12. For one semester, I had the unique experience of living with a girl who was not particularly attractive and had an absurd amount of framed photos of herself scattered all over our apartment. It was a strange situation. I needed a place to stay and she needed a roommate, and we had mutual family friends. To say it was weird would be an understatement. Story 13. My roommate was a quiet person with only one real friend. The two of them would often play Halo together. Towards the end of the year, he got a girlfriend, which was his first and hers as well. They had a unique way of showing intimacy, like spending an hour or more popping his back knee zits. He also told me that when one of them had to use the bathroom, the other would stay and keep them company. Sometimes they would even hold hands just to prove to each other how close they were. It didn't bother me until one day I walked into the living room to find him quickly covering himself up with a pillow. At first, I thought I'd walked in on them doing something intimate, but then she said, "No, that's not what you think. I was just trimming his pubis. Doesn't even have a bone." Story 14. The first 3 weeks of college were quite an experience. My roommate and I were living in a common room with two other party-loving roommates. As one night went by, one of them got absolutely wasted, puking and everything. So my roommate and I had to clean her up. The next morning when we tried to leave, the entire apartment was filled with a horrible stink. We checked up on the hungover roommate and found out she had pooped in her bed and rolled around in it until morning. To make matters worse, she was wearing a thong. We had to spend the entire day airing out the apartment and attempting to clean her bed and sheets without throwing up. What an unforgettable way to start college.